Russia is under no pressure to surrender territory, and they're certainly not going to declare a ceasefire, stand in place, freeze, because they've been down this road before. Every single time the West has taken advantage of those gestures by Russia to either build up Ukraine militarily or to launch attacks. Notice the last time, in conjunction with the talks in Turkey, or Turkey as our fellow Turks like to say, that Russia, as a goodwill gesture, pulled its troops from around Kiev. Now, that was presented in the West. See, they're retreating. We've beaten Putin. He wanted to take Kiev in 3 days, and he couldn't. That was not it was exactly the opposite. So the Russian troops withdrew, and as they were right shortly after they withdrew, the Brits, working with the Ukrainian intelligence, carried out a massacre in Bucha, where they killed a bunch of civilians who were Russian supporters and made it look like this was a Russian atrocity. And that was the message that Pete Hegseth delivered as defense secretary, and it was followed up by J.D. Vance. Europe's no longer an essential partner for us. So they don't like to hear that. But also the fact Ukraine's going to be at the table? No, they're not. Russia's not going to sit down. The Russian government's not going to sit down with any representative of Volodymyr Zelensky's government. They're going to either sit down with somebody from the Rada who's been elected, or unless there are new elections, and you've got somebody who the Russians view as being a legitimate president. But again, from Russia's standpoint, they're winning the war. They continue to advance, and they're killing Ukrainians day after day. Last week, they killed, they reported over 10,000 Ukrainians. Just think, if they continue that at a weekly basis, how many months in a year? 52. That's over 500,000 dead in a year, just 1 year. So this is it's an enormous human tragedy of what's going on. There was no honoring of what was negotiated. So there's the West has zero credibility on this. And the problem here even with folks like Rubio and Ratcliffe and Waltz and Witkoff, I don't think they appreciate how devoid of credibility they are as far as Russia is concerned. So it's one of those things, again, that the Russians feel that they're winning, and despite all Western claims that the economy's in tatters and they're suffering, and I tell you, I've been dealing with a couple of people who they publish influential newsletters and such. They believe that nonsense, and there's no amount of facts that you show them can dissuade them from their mistaken belief that Russia's in trouble. And so Russia, all we got to do is just continue the pressure a little bit more, keep pushing, and they're going to fall over. The ones that are going to fall over, the West is going to collapse in on itself if it keeps this up. In Ukraine, you have this extreme right-wing element. And here is the crazy irony of all of this, or what's so bizarre. Then you go to Germany, and the so-called liberals condemn the AfD as being this extremist or neo-Nazi. And yet, who do they embrace in Ukraine? The neo-Nazis. So there's no consistency there. So with these neo-Nazi elements in Ukraine, they're a minority, but they got the guns and they've got the muscle. It is unclear that there can be an alternative arise to them that would offer a different policy, a different approach, something that the Russians would actually be able to live with. Which goes back to one of Russia's stated objectives is denazification. And denazification means eliminating the right sector and these other groups, putting them in prison or killing them or forcing them out. But they're not going to allow that particular ideology to continue to exist and cultivate this hatred of Russia. Not going to happen. That's what Russia's fighting for. And the West can't paper that over. Look, I think that when you combine what's taking place on the ground militarily with the growing realization, both in Ukraine and Europe, that the United States is not going to stay involved with this, let's call it the project, that the odds of Ukraine being able to have a presidential election, select a legitimate leader that Russia would deal with, I think is very remote. That I think before that happens, there's going to be a coup. The military will take Zelensky out. Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia are now permanent parts of Russia. They have returned to Russia. It was given away by Nikita Khrushchev, who was a Ukrainian anyways, or I'll give ourselves a gift. But that was never historically part of Ukraine. Russia's taken it, and Russia's not giving it back. That's not on the table for negotiation. No matter Zelensky, as I said, he can believe in tooth fairies and Santa Claus and Easter bunnies and name your favorite mythical creature. But Russia's not going to negotiate that. This is one of the first hurdles or obstacles Trump's negotiating team is going to have to get over, is their belief that the Russians are under pressure, that they're really looking for a deal. That their economy's so bad and they're suffering so many losses. They're eager for a deal. We'll see if we can give them a way out. No, they would prefer, look, we'd rather demilitarize our society and focus upon providing nothing but consumer goods and making the lives of Russians better across the board than having to spend this money on our national defense. And to that end, we'd like to be in a peaceful relationship with the West and with Europe. But who's talking about war with Russia? It's Europe. Russia's not talking about war with Europe, but Russia's prepared, listening to them saying they're going to come get us. And we've got a clear track record, really going over the last 20 years, of the constant efforts of the West to destabilize Russia. Russia's not going to make territorial concessions. They're winning. It's again, let's put it into the field of a sports analogy. You're playing in the finals of the World Cup. You are. Since you're in Brazil has a good record for winning the World Cup. They're up 70-1. You're going to have a negotiation where it's okay. Now you've got to be willing to let the Germans take some free kicks. That's not happening. We're winning the game, but again, we're going to try to break their alliance. The Russians have an alliance with Iran, China, North Korea, for a reason. Those countries have never sanctioned Russia, at least in modern history, the last 100 years. They have not carried out and sponsored terrorist attacks inside Russia. They've not been arming another country to launch attacks as killing tens of thousands of Russians. That Russia has been, in a way, forced into these alliances just out of common sense. Zelensky's, again, going back to Jerry Garcia, riding that train high on cocaine. He's out of touch with reality. I think the British Army that inhabited the American colonies in 17th, they had more soldiers here in the colonies at the time than they do in the current army right now. Think about that. All the United States can do is just ignore the UK, and then at that point, what's the UK going to do? They're like a nasty little dog with no teeth. Loud, yeah, but they don't have troops. You got a few nukes, but hell, their navy can't even get out of its ports. The UK is a joke anymore. It's an absolute joke. And they're playing dress up, pretending to be a great military power. They're not. And they really, frankly, haven't been a great military power. That ended with World War I. They burnt themselves out there, survived World War II because of the United States and the Soviets. But now they're having to face reality. This is really another example of this woke mentality. They're the ones that tried to reduce competition in sports so that there were no losers. Everybody's a winner, get a participation trophy. Yeah, Europe's getting a participation trophy, but they're getting beat. And they've let the United States basically humiliate them too. So yeah, this world order governed by the G, it's increasingly irrelevant. The signs are that the next decade, the next 20 years, the countries that are going to play the dominant role: China, Russia, India, the United States. They're the big countries or the big economies. Europe's fading. They're really a second-rate region. This has been more about a colonial U.S., let's call it neo-colonial empire initiative. And going forward, Europe needs to pull its own weight. And they're going to sanction. Trump said, if you're going to put tariffs on goods that we send to you, we're going to put tariffs on goods you send us. And if you don't put tariffs on us, we're not going to put tariffs on you. It would be equal. But I really think this week marked the start of the end of NATO. It became very clear when Hegseth said, hey, if you send French, German, British troops to Ukraine to help secure the peace, you're not doing it under NATO auspices. You don't get to claim if you get shot and killed and attacked that it's an Article 5. And hey, we ain't playing that. You're on your own. And if Ukraine wants some more weapons, you provide it, not us. We've done our bit. We're done. And that was the message. That was genuinely shocking. Europeans bet a lot of money, and particularly the Brits. They were hoping that basically some of this money was like seen as a loan to Ukraine, and that they were going to secure rights to critical minerals assets in Ukraine. That's not going to happen now. Whatever they hoped to take from Ukraine economically is disappearing. The Russians are going to control the critical resource-rich regions. Trump tells Ukraine and Europe, you're fired. It's like back when he was on The Apprentice. You're fired. So not only is the United States, we're not going to put troops on the ground. We're not going to start funding more weapons and non-military support to Ukraine. Europe, you got to do that. If you, the Europeans, decide you want to rush troops into Ukraine, fine, you can do that, but you're not going to do that under NATO. You don't get to call yourself NATO